Actually, I was going to call it the Naked CMO after Jamie Oliver. That was my working title. Conceptually, it was like like nothing to hide kind of thing.
I love that phrase, winning the battle on the ground, not in the air. I think that's a fantastic sentiment when you think about, as a smaller brand owner, how you invest money.
Something's going on. There's no way the kind of corporate PR team phone you up for nothing.
Absolutely.
Whereas go win the crowd and you win your freedom. For the marketer, you need to win the sales crowd to win your freedom, because if you've got 600 people all pushing for Lipton iced tea rather than one, imagine what you can do.
Welcome to another episode of the Commercial Confidence Podcast. Today we're with John Evans, the uncensored CMO and Chief Commercial Officer for System 1. Hear from John about, as a marketeer, how he embraced the sales fundamentals, thinking about how you win a battle on the ground rather than win a battle in the air, and how he's amassed a group of 160 mentors to help him and guide him through his business, all people that he's met through his own podcast. Welcome to the show. So John, thank you so much for sparing us some time, and thank you for hosting us. I know you occasionally go the other side of the mic, but we really appreciate you doing it for us. And I always think about you as being my kind of unofficial sales partner, going into lots of customer meetings, because you're the most kind of sales oriented of the marketing directors I've worked with. So it's great to talk to you about commercial confidence today.
We did a few deals together back
we have
in the
done
day,
a few
didn't
deals.
we? Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I have to say I'm a closet salesman, I think, because I secretly really enjoy it, which I don't always confess to, but no, it's great fun.
No, I think ultimately my residing memory is going into a couple of almost silent auctions where we had the opportunity to pitch the brand, talk about the investment proposition, knowing that potentially other people were elsewhere in the building, trying to do the same thing with their brand. And I think our success rate is quite good. It's
very good. But don't you think it's one of those things people just don't realize that kind of stuff goes on? When I tell people, like the kind of day we had that day, people don't believe that they get you in a room for like hours on end and they get you to put your best deal in. They go away and work out how good it is. They consult with the competition, come back, tell you if you're competitive or not, and no one leaves until a deal's done.
I once did it in a retailer, not when we were working together, but in a retailer who, believe it or not, had no air conditioning in their office in the middle of summer. I'm pretty sure that was part of the tactic, to heat us up.
To have no air conditioning.
Try to get out of there. Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, the online auction's the other thing. I mean, when just before actually we worked together, I was at First Drinks, and the big battles between the two big sherry brands. So we had Croft Sherry, and then Harvey's Bristol Cream was the other one. And your entire year would be down to whether Tesco put you on gondola end number 1 for the 2 weeks before Christmas, right? And so it ended up being like an online auction. So we'd sit there at our computer watching the counter go. Of course, nothing happens for 49 minutes of the 50. You just sat there going, well, wait. And then suddenly like all the activity goes. How much are we prepared to go? 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand.
It's funny you mentioned Harvey's Sherry. The first car I ever went in was a company car for Harvey's Sherry, because my dad was a rep for Harvey Sherry in the late 70s, early 80s. So,
what a job!
A fond memory of that brand. So look, John, clearly things have changed massively since we physically work together, and we catch up occasionally. But just talk to me about the podcast. Talk about System 1. Tell me, for those in our audience who may be more sales oriented than brand and marketing oriented, tell us about you.
Well, I haven't got the normal kind of salesman's journey, I suppose. So I mean, we met at Britvic. I was at Britvic 13 years, and I think that the period of my career which I absolutely loved was Seed Brands, where I know we got to work together, which was basically the concept of managing all the innovative young brands together in kind of a little team. And that's where we got to go and pitch to some pretty big retailers, and that was a lot of fun. Since then, I did a bit of time in private equity. I was kind of working on a management buy-in of a juice company. Went to a competitor to Britvic, so Lucozade, Ribena, Suntory. So I was marketing director there for a couple of years. Had some fun, shall we say? He says in quotes, overseeing the biggest relaunch of Lucozade in its history, taking the sugar out, which turned out to be a bad idea. And then after that, actually, I had a very short time in Brewdog. So Brewdog was like, I'm such a Brewdog fan. And when the role came up, I'm like, I've got to do this, knowing that it was probably never going to work out anyway, because it's such a entrepreneurial business, but also James, the founder, is so incredibly demanding, and in the way he does things. So that lasted about 3 months, but so having done a kind of a very commercial marketing career is probably the best way to describe it. I then found myself unemployed for about 6 months. So I did what most people do, and you just turn yourself into a freelancer and try and help people. And bizarrely, actually, it makes sense now. I look back, but actually, when I was in that time, there was no client side businesses were phoning me up going, we could really do with the CMO. What happened is, all the agencies I'd worked with were like, John, could you come in and help us pitch?
Help us understand.
Yes, exactly. Can you teach us what a CMO's thinking? Why do they buy the agencies they buy? What's the secret to a good pitch? And they kind of had me down as probably a kind of good candidate for that. So I spent 6 months doing kind of pitch training for loads of different businesses, actually, design agencies, PR agencies, ad agencies, and this research company called System One. So for about 6 months, I was basically doing business development for other people and secretly quite enjoyed it, actually. But the interesting moment came, and this will bring us back to the podcast. The pitch training went really well. I love pitching. I mean, you and I did some great pitches together. Yeah, I learned so much of you and how you did it, and I enjoy it as a kind of a bit of a game. It's like a game, isn't it?
I think you've got to treat it as that, because
I know
the pressure's there. Therefore, you've got to plan hard, fight easy. As you
totally. And I think there's a lot more soft skills than people realise for pitching. How you get information out of the client, and how you position yourself. And there's loads of learnings I got doing that. But it was really interesting because what all those agencies said to me, they said exactly the same thing. How can you get us in front of CMOs? And I said, well, do you know what? I mean, I know I've been a CMO, but CMOs don't go down the golf course like you sales guys do, right? We don't have the Friday afternoon. There is no equivalent to that, right? I'm not just hanging out, with all these other CMOs. And I thought, how would I find a legitimate excuse to sit down with CMOs and talk about what I do? And then the podcast idea came to me. I thought, if I can create some value for other people, that actually means I have an authentic reason to build a relationship with them, that I create value for them, going back to pitching really. If I can create some good value for CMOs and in return build a trusted relationship that may at some point lead to business. And that's the key thing, I think. Most people just go straight in with the hard sell. Instead, I've always believed that you create value for people first. And then when they're in the market for what you're selling, you'll be front of mind, they'll come back. So that was actually the reason I set the podcast up. And it was quite a funny story as to where the name came from, because I got invited to Cannes. Now, I'd never been to Cannes before.
That's the golf equivalent, isn't it?
This is the golf equivalent. Well, actually, yeah, to be fair, we take your golf course and we raise you on the south of France on the Riviera on some yachts. Okay, right, we're getting the stereotypes out properly, aren't we? But it was the first time I've ever been, because I could never justify doing that as a CMO. I mean, can you imagine the expenses and having to go to your boss? I'm just going to take a week off to go down the south of France and mix with some people getting awards and this sort of thing. So never happened as a client. But I got invited to be on a panel for System One and to speak as a former client about creativity and the role advertising plays. And I got a bit lucky because CNBC were filming for their news channel from the south of France, from Cannes, about what CMOs thought of the festival. And so I thought, this sounds great. I could say what I want because I don't work for anybody. So I just kind of tell it how it is. So I had a 4-minute clip with this guy and I just told him absolutely what I thought. So I ripped into Cannes a little bit, I have to say. I wasn't, I was saying, look, this is great. We're having a good time. But the one person that's not here is the customer. The person that actually buys the product we're selling is not represented in the way the awards are done and judged and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I said something like that. He stopped the camera. He looked around at me. He said, "You, sir, are the first uncensored CMO I've met all week." And I thought,
I'll write that down.
Oh, I thought that's a nice name because I've been thinking about the podcast and actually I was going to call it the Naked CMO after Jamie Oliver. That was my working title. Conceptually, it was like like nothing to hide kind of thing. But I was kind of worried about following through on that promise. It's fine for audio, but as soon as we go visual, it might be a problem. Anyway, but then I thought, uncensored CMO, that's a much better idea. So that's where the kind of the idea came from.
Fantastic. It's really interesting. You talked about that time between Brewdog and joining System One, because I remember we met and you talked about wanting to meet lots of new people to learn about new industries, learn about new roles, and you talked about meeting 100 people in 100 days or something. And it's something I've not shared this with you, but it's something I've really taken forward over the last 12, 18 months myself. And the ability to meet people from new walks of life, it's just amazing. You don't realise quite how you get into a bubble just doing the day job.
I had a real revelation actually after I'd been fired. Well, I got fired twice in 1 year, so it was not my best year, annus horribilis or whatever they call it. And I think there's a difference in corporate. What I realised is in corporate culture, most people are out to undermine you or expose you. If we're honest, right? It's all about looking good, playing to the gallery, politically saying the right thing, leveraging relationships, alignment, all that sort of thing. It's a very political game. It's more political, I think, than people realise. The higher up you get, the more political it gets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I realized is after I got fired and I was out, as you say, I came up with this idea of to keep me motivated and keep me on track. I was like, what if I could meet 100 people in 100 days? And I'd ask each of those people, tell me 3 people you think I could benefit from having a conversation with. Because if I'm honest, I only got to 33 people by myself, right? So the only way I get to 100 was multiplying it by 3. That's where the logic came from,
absolutely.
right? So I asked these, and what was amazed is to a man and a woman, everybody agreed. And they you know, these are busy people. Some of them quite wealthy people, as you know, run their own businesses or VCs, that kind of thing. It really restored my faith in humanity. So having gone through quite a political situation in a big company where it felt like we weren't all on the same team, in that world where you're networking with small business owners and startups and investors and that sort of thing, there's a lovely collegiate feel where people I've never met, but they trust me because we have some, you know, friends in common. That trust you build through kind of, you know, referring people. It really gave me a lot of energy, and it made me realize how much of your wealth is your network.
Absolutely,
and it's incredible. So it really opened my eyes to the power of networking, which, coming back to the podcast, became a vehicle for me to multiply that network. And the more the network has multiplied, the more opportunity has multiplied with it. So it's just a classic thing of like, and so it's interesting actually. I think someone we work with, Sophie Jackson, from Brewdog days.
Absolutely.
I remember she calling me up, asking for some advice. This is maybe a few years after I left Brewdog, and she said, "Do you know what, John? You're the one person that I've noticed will keep in touch with everybody without an agenda." And she said, "Why'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, because at some point that's going to come good. At some point, something's going to happen, and it'll be just down to the fact that I gave you a call for no agenda," and so on. So it's interesting. So, you know, even those relationships you might have forged 15, 20 years ago, at some point will pay back.
Yeah, it's always amazing. And people who understand that, it can be 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And you call and say, "I was thinking about you," or "I saw your brand in store," or "I thought about something you'd said to me a while ago. How are things?" And it just, if you keep front of mind, you may be able to help them one day, they can help you another time. But I think it's really undervalued, and you really see people who don't embrace that when they do leave corporate life. It can be really tricky for people. I think I heard you say on, maybe it was last week's podcast, your podcast, people who are really struggling to find senior roles in the industry at the moment, it's harder than it's ever been for lots of different reasons. You'll make it even harder for yourself if you don't stay in touch with that network.
There's a lovely little story actually. When I left Brewdog, I wanted to go into private equity. Originally, my plan was to try and buy Purdy's and Arme and Aqualibra, right? So I'd gone to private equity companies to try and raise some money. In the end, that didn't happen because the fruit shoot recall happened and the deal came off the table. But I was trying to work out, how do I get into private equity? Because the clue's in the title, it's private, right? And they don't really advertise. And I actually went to a reverse headhunter. So because there are people out there that headhunt on your behalf, not on the kind of company's behalf. So they try and place you in particular jobs. But you have to pay quite a lot. So I went and had this interview with this lady. She's absolutely fantastic. And but it's quite expensive. You have to put quite a few £1,000s into just, you know, retaining them before. But she said something which lost her the business with me, but actually got me a job. And she said to me this. She said, "I bet you in your phone list now is someone who knows precisely the person you need to know to get into private equity." And I said, "I don't believe you. Absolutely. I just don't believe you. I mean, the reason I'm here is because I don't know someone in private equity. So how can that be the case?" And I remember leaving the building thinking, I'll give this a try. I got as far as C. And even worse than that, right? Not only was it C, the guy was in my own team.
Wow.
So Chris Coleridge, who was the founder of V-Water.
I remember Chris, Do you
remember Chris?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Absolutely wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He invented it. He had private equity investment for V-Water before they sold to Pepsi. And I went, I don't believe it. It's under my nose this whole time. So I phoned up Chris and I said, "Give me 3 private equity companies you'd go and talk to that you think," and he reeled them straight off, gave me names, gave me phone numbers, did a personal introduction. And within 2 weeks, I only met the first person he recommended. Within 2 weeks, I'd done a deal with them and I was at Purity and I'd gone to Purity.
Yeah, amazing.
And I was like, I can't believe in the space of probably no more than 1 month, I'd gone, I don't know anybody, to go to this reverse headhunter, got the idea, went through my list, went, I can't believe the guy's sat in the office with me, literally across from the seat. And I didn't even realize he had the experience and the contacts that I needed.
But the simple fact is, if you've got 300 great contacts in your phone, far better than 30, as per what we were just saying.
And this is the multiplying effect. This is what I found in the podcast, because as your network multiplies, so does your opportunity, and as your fame multiplies, again, your opportunity multiplies with it. So it's something you have to invest in. So it's a bit like LinkedIn. I decided about 2 years ago to intentionally do LinkedIn daily, and it's an investment. I probably spend an hour a day on LinkedIn, and I know some people look at it and go, "Why is he wasting his time?" I cannot tell you how many good things have happened, but they don't happen in the first year or even the first 18 months, maybe not even the first 2 years. But your future self will be thanking you for things you did today. And you just have to persist with it, because it has, as you said, compounding is a great phrase, actually, because it is a compounding effect. And if you have a podcast, you have LinkedIn, you take time out of your day job to meet people like we meet up every now and then and have coffee and compare notes. Those things compound over time, and they will pay back a lot. And you might get made redundant next week, and you'll be thanking the fact that 3 years ago you decided to build your profile or keep a network. Keep building a network.
No, absolutely, without a doubt. So if we look at the world of marketing right now and look at what's going on, based on your last 10 podcast conversations, what are the things that have really excited you?
Yeah. Oh, that's a lovely question. I mean, there's so much going. I mean, well, this week's episode is with Sophie Neary. So
she's on the train this morning.
Yeah, she's managing director of retail and consumer at Google. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Sophie actually was Google have so much information on what is going on, and the amount of data and intel they have about what's trending, who's buying, why they're buying, that kind of thing is insane. And then the ability they have with YouTube to create a platform. I mean, YouTube is incredible, because it's sort of like the best of TV and the best of social media combined. So you can create an equivalent of an epic film production effectively very cheaply with creators, and you can connect in a very targeted way to your audience. So that's incredible. And one of the things that I found fascinating by it was when Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman did Deadpool times Wolverine recently. They chose to launch it by partnering with 10 YouTube creators and appearing on their shows. Now, can you imagine, there are TV companies that wouldn't be able to get Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman to be on prime time. Absolutely. But instead they're going to go to some YouTube creators that launched their show 18 months ago, like Chicken Shop Girl, who's now got tens of millions of followers. Absolutely. So I find it very exciting from a marketing point of view that you can create content and create fame and build reputation and do that in a way that 20 years ago was unthinkable. You'd have to be a trained RADA actor, and then pitch amongst thousands of people to get one role in Emmerdale or something, Now you can actually invent something yourself, and if the idea is good enough, it can take off. And the barrier to entry, like podcasting, right? The barrier to entry is about £500 worth of. Actually, you've spent a bit more, I can see. But you could start a podcast £500 if you wanted to, in terms of the artwork, the licensing of the software, and then a couple of microphones and a mixing desk.
So
it's not hard,
no,
which is great. So that's exciting. So no, I've had loads of good conversations. And I mean, obviously, the one before that was always good. Is with Mark Ritson, so he's kind of like the world's most opinionated marketing professor. But what's lovely is whenever Mark and I talk, it just gets the conversation going. So whether it's on positioning or advertising or purpose or whatever. So and what I love about him is he's just so bright. He just knows his stuff, right? So, but he's also entertaining, and he combines this journalistic ability to sniff out a story with absolute marketing chops. So so I mean, Mark's probably one of the most returning guests for me, but every time I drop an episode with Mark, I just see this enormous level of engagement for everybody. So
I haven't listened to that particular episode where he reviews the beer adverts, but it's on my list.
That was good fun. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that one.
Well, I tell you what, talking about fame building, there's a really funny story to do that one. So we were recording this is maybe a month ago from when we're recording this that we did this, and we had this idea last year to say, wouldn't it be great to have a podcast in a pub? It would just be a great environment.
Sorry about the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. We'll upgrade this for the next one. Yeah. And in fact, I was down in Australia seeing Mark. Actually, we hung out for the day, and actually we're swimming in the sea and stuff, just chewing the fat over what we should do this year. And he was like, I want to review the 10 best beer ads of all time down the pub whilst drinking the beer, right? I was like, this sounds great. What could possibly go wrong? Anyway, so we found this pub. We booked this pub out. We had this constant supply of beer. It was great fun. But the manager bought us a pint of Wrexham lager. And we're like, oh, yeah. Wrexham. Well, we know who's made Wrexham famous. Yeah. So as a joke, I said to Mike, let's do a pretend like little 30 seconds about Ryan Reynolds can do many things, but we don't think he can do beer. So we're just basically pissing about, just going, he's got a beautiful wife. He's kind of like, he's a very successful actor. He's bought businesses. He's one of the most creative people on the planet. He's made epic productions. The guy is lost. He cannot, there's no way he can do beer. Anyway, I put that on LinkedIn and I got a call from Wrexham, the beer company, and they said, your post has popped up on our brand tracker. Right. And I'm like, oh, has it? Interesting. We want to know what you know that we don't know. I was like, oh, well, I don't know anything. What do you know that I don't know that you don't know then? Sort of thing. I had this really weird conversation about, do you know anything I don't know that you don't know? It was one of those weird things. Okay, well, we both know nothing about whatever it is you think we know that we don't know. It was just one of those really funny conversations. I put the phone down going, something's going on. There's no way the kind of corporate PR team phone you up for nothing.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Anyway, 2 weeks later, Ryan announced he'd bought the brand. So I popped out on LinkedIn to go, I blended his launch ad with my.
And you genuinely had no clue.
No. We were just kind of riffing on it. We were pretending we had a scoop. We were pretending to kind of break news that he had bought this brand, and then it turns out he had. So anyway, occasionally you get serendipity does you a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. One of the things that we talk a lot about at the moment in our business is the blurring of marketing and sales and the environments in which brands are trying to build brands. What's your view on where retail media is going and how big it can be?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's something that you and I think did pretty well, didn't we? Because I think the problem with marketing and sales separation is we both sit there and we kind of spend our money here and spend our money there, and they don't help each other. And like the first job as a marketer is to win the sale, and you can't do that unless you're stocked. I mean, this is probably the thing that I understood that some of my colleagues didn't. They'd spend all their time thinking about the consumer engagement. If you're not on the shelf, it doesn't matter. So the first job is to be available, right? And all the marketing textbooks will tell you that. First, have a good product. Okay, we'll assume you've got a good product. You've done that due diligence. The next thing is to be available. So I think I always looked at marketing when I was at Brewdog, partly because I had less budget than everyone else. But anyway, my first thought was, how do I use this to win the battle in store? Because, this much better than I do with what you do, but the amount you can win in store is just phenomenal. It is incredible how much a difference you can make in store, whether it's the number of facings, whether it's the placement, back of store, front of store, whether it's the flavored range you choose, whether it's the promotion, the merchandising. The difference, I mean, I saw this in the V-Water sales. Like if we compare a store where we got, really good execution versus one we didn't, it's an order of magnitude of 20 or 30x. I mean, particularly on a small brand. I think on big brands, there's maybe the variance is a bit less because they're at a higher level already, but particularly for a new brand launch or a challenger brand,
critical.
It is incredible, the difference. So I think I really learned, particularly in that period of time, is you have to win the battle in store first. That buys you permission for everything else, but you've got to start there. And I think most marketers don't get this. They think that sales and marketing is this kind of parallel lines that run together. They've got to be joined together. Yeah. So I found that I learned this even more at Purity, where I had no budget. So anything I did had to purely be in service of convincing a buyer to say yes.
Absolutely.
So I weirdly, I remember on Juice Burst, I said, I only have a target audience of 20 of the biggest soft drink buyers in the country, right? That is my target audience. So I wasn't thinking about how do I communicate to millions of people. I'm just thinking there are 20 people in 20 offices that I need to become best friends with, and they need to feel that everything I'm doing is to help them be successful. And if I can help them be successful, then that buys me permission. It buys me the rate of sale. It buys me the distribution. It buys me the revenue. I can go back to the business and say, oh, look, we've just smashed our targets. Now I'm going to take 20% of that back and we're going to start engaging the customer. Absolutely. Now they know where they can buy it, sort of thing. So I think the philosophy I had when I did Seed Brands was the battle, the primary philosophy we had is the battle is won on the ground, not in the air. And so we lived by that, and I learned so much by doing that. And that's what any kind of founder will tell you. For all the great advertising you might want to do, unless you win the battle on the ground, you'll be nowhere. So it's absolutely critical.
No, I love that phrase, winning the battle on the ground, not in the air. I think that's a fantastic sentiment when you think about as a smaller brand owner, how you invest
You have
money.
to, yeah.
It's really interesting. About spring of 23, I was involved in a conversation with a very large impulse brand, won't name them, but a very large impulse brand who wanted to get a very large quantity of samples of their product into the hands of people on the street. And we got into a conversation where we said, how do we talk to them in such a way and support them on this campaign, which can be very different to the other kind of agencies that could approach it and other organizations that could approach it. And we were very much acting as an advisor because we don't have the people to deploy. We just try to advise on the strategy. And we made it really clear that with all of the retailer data that's available and stuff you would have worked on in Seed Brands and at Purity, how do you take that retailer data, look at where you are really well stocked versus not so well stocked, where you're over trading, you're under trading, and just try to make that sampling of a large number of samples as effective as you can. And we just proposed something to say, we can really help you target how much do you invest in Newcastle versus Manchester versus London, and how do you go about doing this? And it just fell on completely deaf ears because the objective was do 7 figures of samples and do it as cheaply as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating because there's all of this data. We talked recently, I did a training course with a retailer, funny enough, and we said 93% of the sales of the average sales director go through Tesco through to Waitrose. And there's really granular data on 6 of those 8 customers. And yet sales are using it a little bit. Marketing are not getting anywhere near it in most businesses. So there's a huge opportunity there. So I'm starting to think that our target is more the CFO and the MD than
you're right.
the commercial director or the marketing director.
And I think this is where the sales and marketing silos don't help. I mean, this is interestingly where the C brand model really worked in my favor, because I didn't necessarily own everybody, but I owned the end-to-end delivery from the idea and the design, the pack, through to who put it on the shelf, because we had our own merchandising team, didn't we? So what that meant is I could make a decision neutral of media or channel, right? I could go, Lipton Iced Tea's brand problem is no one thinks they like it. When they try it, they love it, right? I had a really clear brand problem, right? Now, if you worked in a silo, what would happen is the brand manager would go and do a TV campaign saying, don't knock it till you try it. The most stupid thing you can do, because why tell people to try it and not make them try it? You see,
put your money where your mouth is and give it to them first time around.
No one's going to like take you on face value that, oh yeah, you know, just because you say it, it's going to be great. You've got to actually try it. So the beauty of the model that I was working with, even though I had much smaller budgets, I was able to do exactly what you said, right? I was able to go, the highest consumption Lipton Iced Tea is central London, cosmopolitan, commuter belt, the whole thing, right?
Peach, as I remember.
It was peach. It was interestingly though, actually, because peach and lemon were the same rate of sale, but in sensory testing, peach outperformed lemon in terms of consumer panel. So therefore, all the samples were peach. Rate of sale of peach a year after our sampling, 50% higher. And then it got into the top 10 SKU list on the kind of rankings that the buyer's looking at. Then it became a must stock. And then once you're a must stock, you can go and extend distribution. You can go down to your rival and go, well, you're missing out on category sales because they've got it and they're growing their category more than they've grown their category. And then it basically becomes this virtuous circle. Yeah. And the secret to the marketer is you can then spend money on your lovely campaign. You can't do it if you do your lovely campaign first and the rate of sales not there, right? So you've got to go the other way around. But back to your point of retail sales, the beauty of that is we could work out by postcode and by store where to spend the money. So marketing and sales work together. So what I was doing is my sampling campaign, they had the retail sales. They could say, we're going to sample in Bishopsgate because Bishopsgate has the #1 Tesco Metro in the country. Everyone goes there at lunchtime between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So what happened? Lipton Peach Iced Tea was sampled outside of the Metro store. Our rate of sale, I think we got into top 10. It might have even been top 5. I can't remember. We got really, really high out of the 100 SKUs. Suddenly we're a top 10 brand. That's a headline, right? In our world, that's a headline. Would you believe it? Lipton Iced Tea is a top 10 SKU in Tesco Metros. And you only need a proof of concept like that to build confidence in the sales team to go, this sells. And the moment a salesperson thinks this sells, my job's easy, they're going to chase it, right? So it's also the other thing that marketers forget is most of your battle is internal as well. You know, it's a bit like the Gladiator, and Gladiator 2's just come out. Isn't it? It's like in Gladiator 1, where it's go win the crowd and you win your freedom. For the marketer, you need to win the sales crowd to win your freedom, because if you've got 600 people all pushing for Lipton iced tea rather than one, imagine what you can do. And it's the proof points like that. So how you use the data is absolutely critical. So marketers need to understand that the retail data is their friend and that knowledge is powerful. And the other thing, actually, another example of this, a less positive example, but also will tell you how important the data is. So when I had my 2 years at Lucozade Ribena Suntory, I went through the biggest brand change in its 85-year history, which is taking the sugar out or taking the sugar down below the sugar tax. It was brutal. But I learned something really powerful, and it was this, that as a marketer, I had all my brand tracking studies measuring kind of, mass market consumer sentiment and, frequency of buying and penetration, those kind of things. It took our Millward Brown brand tracker 9 months to pick up that we had any issue on the brand at all. And in those 9 months, we'd probably lost 20 million pounds of profit, 50 million in retail sales, the damage that had been done in those 9 months. Tesco Club cards, I knew within days. Yeah. Because what Tesco Club card was able to tell me was suddenly fewer people are buying. Suddenly they're not repeating as much. Suddenly the promotional sales on Gondola N number 7 that usually do 200,000 per week were doing 150,000 per week. So the feedback you get from retail data, because it's live, it's EPOS, and particularly with Club Card as well, because you get to know who's buying, where are they buying, why are they buying, have they stopped buying, what else they're buying in their basket. The richness of that data to the marketer is huge, but the problem is it sits in a silo. It sits in the sales. The sales team have got all that data. The marketing department could learn from it, and I think this is where marketing and sales need to get together and work out how. This is why the commercial director role is quite neat, because if you can pull those two data sets together, you're in a much better position to make a good decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great top tip in terms of commercial curiosity and looking the other side of the fence. That's an amazing snippet of advice for people around the role of loyalty data for brand health as much as sales health.
Yeah, and I think people forget as well that your primary audience first has to be to win over the customer, as in the buyer as well, right? And I remember probably one of the best launches I ever got involved in was Mountain Dew, and we just launched Mountain Dew. It was incredible success, and I'd gone back to Pepsi, and they had this line in America which is called Code Red, and it was just the coolest thing ever. So an on-pack promotion with the launch of Halo 5, the game. Yeah. And we partnered with the makers of the game and with Sainsbury's, so that at midnight when the game launch happened, we had piles and piles of Dew, basically, linked up with Halo 5 kind of in store. And the ability to connect the kind of consumer insight in terms of game fuel, we called it, because it was the brand that kept you up long enough to complete the game. It's a real consumer insight.
One day I could,
exactly
in the past I could have done
that. You need it more the older you get.
But
anyway, with a really exciting, culturally relevant, product launch, with a customer that wanted to give reason to people to come in store. Sainsbury's, I think, wanted to lead on it and get there first. So it's about thinking about how can your consumer activity line up with your trade objectives? And that is a question that so few marketers ever ask, because they only think consumer and they forget that the customer is the route to the consumer.
Absolutely.
And I think that, the people the marketers that understand that were always the best marketers, always got the best results. And the thing I used to tell my team is green numbers buy you freedom. And the way to get green numbers is great execution. Execute brilliantly first. It will give you permission. It'll give you permission, not just creatively to do what you want, but permission to give you the budget to reinvest in
fuel into the P&L.
Exactly. Yeah. And the whole thing's a virtuous circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. Moving the agenda away maybe from some of that kind of real core brand learning, I'd love to understand, the last 5 years has been really different for you. And I can remember, listening to the podcast pre-pandemic and then during lockdown, and you've done a fantastic job of keeping it going and keeping a fantastic guest list. Who have you found in terms of new mentors, new advisors, people that have really changed your thinking over the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's been a wild journey, actually. And I think one thing I've personally learned is that there's not enough conversation on B2B marketing, because actually what I found is that I'm an accidental B2B marketer, right? So I suddenly find myself working for a research company, selling to other marketers. It's a bit of a weird thing. I'm a marketer selling to marketers. And therefore, I've had to change my thinking in terms of how you do that and how I build my brand and how I build the company's brand that I work for, sort of thing. So I've had to learn some B2B skills, maybe we have this big debate in marketing. Is B2B really different to B2C? Ironically, my strength has been carrying over some of the B2C skills and some of the things I learned, like with you, in terms of how to win over buyers and that kind of thing, into my current job. So that's been really good. But I think what's particularly inspired me, which is probably an unusual answer to the question actually, is I've created a scenario with a podcast where I get to sit down with the most creative people on the planet, the people that have won the most creative awards, the people that are doing the kind of advertising that gets talked about around the world. I get to sit down with business owners, the people that have created the most stunning new product launches. And I get to sit down with the planet's best thinkers on particular subject matters, whether it's design, it could be advertising, whatever. And that is an immense privilege. So what I've created, maybe accidentally, is basically 160 mentors that at any point in time I can listen to and be inspired. And every single episode I do, it's weird to say this, but I do it for myself first. And then if anyone else gets any benefit, then that's great, because I have to prepare for every conversation. And in the preparation process, I have to think about, what do I want to learn in this conversation? What do I want to happen as a result of this conversation taking place? So in terms of mentoring me, in a way, the answer to the question is 160 of the world's most successful people have become my mentors, and every single conversation I will learn something. And it's almost like this weekly flywheel where every single week I'm learning something that will make me a better marketer and a better business developer as well. So, I mean, in a way, the other interesting thing I've learned, and this is something that, I mean, you'll resonate with this, right? But this is the first job I've done for 5 years. I've never done a job for 5 years. My previous record was 4. And what I'm realizing, this compound thing we talked about earlier, really starts to kick in, because the investments you make early take a while to pay off. And what I've done is I've created a system that means, by having a podcast that launches weekly, I am forced to every week to learn something and to get better.
Absolutely.
And I'm self-imposed. It's now imposed upon me, which actually is, I think, the good thing to think about if anyone's listening that wants to do something similar is, what system can you create that is greater than your motivation? Because you could wake up one day and go, I want to write a book. But how do you put a system in place that means that a book is inevitably going to happen?
Yeah.
And that's what I found with the podcast. The moment about 2 years ago, I sat down with my producer, James, and we said, from January, we will commit to record every episode live in person, because that gets better quality. We'll commit to publishing at 6 a.m. every Wednesday, so that we cannot get out of it. And creating a system that beats my motivation has been the secret to why it keeps on getting better. So I think, whatever job you're doing, whatever you're trying to do, find those systems that basically make you better. And mentoring inspiration can come from so many places. It might be a book, it might be a podcast, it might be networking, whoever, mentors and so on. Yeah. So find the system.
That's great. One thing, bring a third podcast into the conversation, the high performance podcast, which I'm a huge fan of. I think it was Jake Humphrey that said, fall in love with the process. Because if you fall in love with the process, you'll force yourself, to go through that process, but you'll really enjoy the benefit as you go. That's
really good advice. And we have this romanticized idea of writing books or doing podcasts where it's all the creative process, and that's fine when you're feeling creative, but that's not most days. So what you have to do is find the system that overrides you having a bad day, or you being busy, or you being distracted by something else, or life just taking over. So I mean, for podcasting, for example, I have to think, how do I get 6 weeks of contingency so that if something happens in my life, that's not going to become a problem for me delivering a quality podcast every week. So the system advice is, it's probably creativity gets you the idea, but the system gets you the success.
Yeah. But it sounds like you've also got a great team around you. I'm very lucky. I've got kind of a virtual team around me that's helping me with this. But you've got a great team around you.
The team is essential. Actually, I have to say, I say I got lucky, but it wasn't luck necessarily. But I've got a very, very, very supportive employer in System One. They see the benefit in the podcast quite clearly, because it drives leads for us, and it also, actually, what I was pleasantly surprised about, it also engages our existing customer as well, because most of our existing customers will listen to some degree, and and so it extends our reach within customers, which performs a great role. But they have really supported the podcast in giving me the resource to enable me to scale the podcast without me having to not be able to do my job, you see. So I've been able to juggle both. It's pretty hard, right? Having a full-time podcast that's scaling and a full-time job that also happens to be scaling, because that's scaling. So you end up, the ability to do both only works if you get the systems right and you get the people. that, you know, want to go on the journey with you and can do stuff you don't. And I'm blessed because I've got, at the moment, 2, we're increasing probably to 4, but I've got 2 fantastic people that are just do things I can't do.
And then we'll clone John, and that'll be
yeah,
make it easier.
Well, unfortunately, I'm a bit of a disaster. So I think, like, I can do the chatting, but cloning, people that can do the organisation, the planning, the research, the production, the quality control, all those sort of that's the bit that's that I like, and I need to hire in.
To hire in for, absolutely.
Yeah.
So look, John, thank you so much. One thing I'd love to end on is a note around commercial confidence. We as Sellex talk a lot about commercial confidence, and we always ask our guests, tell us your best piece of advice that's given you the commercial confidence to be where you are today, but also to have had the success that you've had. So your top tip for building commercial confidence.
Oh, I love that. It's really, really good. I think probably it's know your customer. And I think when I did one of the most fun bits of training I did back in the day, I think it was a gap negotiation training course where they just teach you the art of the reverse interview. And I know you do this particularly well, I know, but I've really learned from you and other people like you who've just got this ability to ask the right questions of a customer that reveals an insight that you can build on or bring your product into. And I am partly why I'm a podcast host, really, but I've learned to nurture that skill. And the more you nurture the ability to understand a customer, where they're coming from, what their objectives are, what makes them successful, how decisions get made in their organization, what are the pain points, what business issues they're struggling with, all those things. The more you understand the customer, the more confidence it gives you that you can position what you're doing in a way that's going to be a win-win. And I think that's the bit in sales, like the thing that I sort of makes me laugh a bit, but we focus so much on the sell.
The tell.
Yeah. The tell. Yeah. We should focus on the buy. And to focus on the buy, you don't need to do any selling. And in a way, I kind of think I never ever close a deal because I don't need to, right? Because I'm letting them buy. I know it sounds a bit silly, but if you're good enough, then you can just ask the questions, you can lead the conversation, you can add value, you can be as useful as you can. And one of the slight tangent this one, but one of the best data points I've come across in my marketing role is from Ehrenberg Bass. Did some research into B2B decision makers, and what they worked out is 95% of your audience are not in market to buy what you're selling today. And the moment you know that, you suddenly realize your job is I'm not here to convert you today, unless you're in the 1 in the 20, in which case let's talk about terms. Your job is actually to build a long-term relationship that means at the point in future they have the need, you come to mind. Absolutely. Now, the moment you understand that, suddenly it takes the pressure off, right? I don't have to close a deal. I never close a deal. Right? I don't have to ever close it. I don't ever have to feel that pressure of I must force this conversation to close in 3.5 minutes, right? I'm there to think, how do I add the most amount of value? How do I get to know you as well as I can? How do I build a relationship that you'll trust me? And if I do those things repeatedly across enough customers, the business will come in without me trying. And that's the beauty, and that's where confidence comes from. Because once you've got that, once you see that pattern and you get those skills, then suddenly you can relax a bit. And I'm not trying to force this. I'm not trying to force a close here. And you can always tell. You're a smart. You're very smart, and you can see, can't you, when people are trying to do that to you? And it's just the most cringy, awkward thing in the world, isn't it? When
but it comes back to that trust the process. Because if you've got the process, it's proven. Accept that these things work on a longer time scale. Trust the process, and the proof's in the pudding. It's working for you. Made a
fantastic point there, and this is the weird thing. I learned this lesson weirdly when I was made redundant and I was freelancing, and it's a horrible situation because you're getting 1 or 2 week bits of work at a time that don't have anything more than a month. A month would be great, right? And I remember saying to my wife, like, I'd go home and go, I don't know where next month's paycheck's going to come from, and she goes, but every month it has come. So why don't you look at your track record and trust yourself that you don't know where it's going to come in, but it always does come in. And it's a bit like that with sales. Is I know that by being generous, by building relationships, by investing for free in those things, not asking for anything in return, I know enough now because I've done that long enough to know, and I don't know where the success will come from, right? So if I go to 20 different customers and I'm generous with all of them and I try and help all of them, I don't know which 2 or 3 are going to phone up next week and go, and they're often surprising. It's often not where you think.
I agree.
Because the person that happens to have the need that you're going to meet, you can't predict that. It's almost impossible to predict it. So I think, you just have to believe in the process, as you said, and that means you have to let go of the fear that you have to close everything straight away. And the moment you remove the fear of having to close, it makes you a better salesperson, because
people aren't sensing the fear.
They aren't. And you have this, you know, I mean, I don't call it swagger or what you call it, but you have this level of inner confidence that means you don't need to close this straight away, which means you can just focus on actually doing the right thing, not having to kind of force a deal over the table because I got the quarterly result. Actually, the other thing I'd say, so just to add to that, the other thing I've learned is always play the long game, not the short game, because I've been in so many situations, and I know you'll have been the same, where if you obsess about weekly, monthly, or even quarterly delivery, you end up not doing the right thing for the long term. The moment you focus on probably 6, 12, 18 months, you start doing the right thing and playing the long game. And then what happens is the short game becomes easy, because you've won those big customers that repeat. You know, you've got 3 customers coming at you rather than 1 suddenly, because you've played the long game. And then you get this momentum, and then that buys you freedom. And the freedom that buys you is then I can hire a team. Absolutely. I can hire more people. I can invest in my brand and that sort of thing. So I think when everyone else is going short, go long. Go long. And then your future self will thank you that you went long, sort of thing. Now, I know it's hard, because some businesses work on quarterly earnings results. Yeah. And you go through that very uncomfortable feeling of going, I haven't delivered in the quarter, but I'm going to smash the year. And you have to ask for faith, you know, from the business to go, right, we're going to back you to, you know, lay the groundwork for a long-term success.
Yeah, I've definitely had to change my psychology, because I've worked for FTSE 250s, I've worked for bigger PLCs than that as well. And there is that, you know, hit your month, hit your quarter, hit the year. But taking that mindset and going, all the right ingredients are going into this cake, trust it, keep the faith, and people will sense you're building a great cake. And you're right, it comes.
And it's hard. I remember when I started System 1, I had a hybrid kind of sales and marketing. I was hybrid marketing and new business role, should I say. Year 1, I think I won like £90,000 of business. I didn't even pay for my salary, right? Year 2, 600,000. Year 3, very close to 4 million. I mean, so year 3, that's astonishing by any measure. Just a team of 3 of us, right? So 4 million is pretty impressive. But that first year, you could have cut me loose. You could have gone, okay, well, you know, you talk a good game, but you're not seeing much. Second year, you're probably like, okay, we're starting to see something. Third year, you know, you're very glad you cut the first year. Yeah, exactly. And fourth year, I haven't even worked out yet. It's probably
but it'll come, as we've said.
It will. It will. And again, I'm thanking my former self for things I did 3 years ago that are now paying off big time now.
No, great. Well, look, what I'd really like to do, John, is end this by saying thank you for today, but also thank you for the influence you've had on me over the last few years, the recent conversations we've had, because actually, given the situation I'm in, building the Sellex business as we are, you've been a great inspiration and a great support. So I really thank you for that. So
well, you're doing great stuff, again, man. And I'm really excited to see where Sellex goes next. It's a kick-ass proposition, and no one better than you to do it.
No, thank you. That's really kind of you. Look, and I'll see you very soon.
You will.
Thanks, John.